This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 28th of September 2020 and I am 2J.
And I am DM. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. The Daily Nation. Raila, the unlikely underdog of 2020. The Standard. Ruto in a frenzy. And finally in the Star, why Ruto is walking a tightrope over pledges. Let's start with Raila, and then to Ruto, and then to Ruto.
Raila, the unlikely underdog of 2022. Now, the Nation is telling us that the Raila Odinga we are seeing today looks unfocused and says he's behaving in an unfocused way that is not typical of the experienced, aggressive tactician. I say, well, I mean, why would you call him an underdog in the first place? And I want to dispute this. I want to debunk this thing that Raila is an underdog and that I'm not holding brief for him. But look, let's look at some facts. Now, right, if there's actually nobody who has more than 10,000 hours in running for presidential election in this country like Raila has, right? And look, I don't think he's an underdog. I actually think he's a front runner. Why am I saying this? From the last election, Raila Odinga had 44% of the total vote, meaning he just needed 6% plus 1 to become president. Is that constituency still intact? I want to believe it. It is still
that 44%.
That 44%. And I'm saying this because if you're going to get 6% of the total vote, it's about what, 40 million. It's just about 890,000 people. Votes. Easy, right? Can Uhuru Kenyatta be able to give him 800,000 votes?
At the bare minimum,
yes. At the bare minimum, absolutely. So Kikuyu is number one overrating yourselves. You're actually not needed in this election. Second,
that is so rude.
Yes.
Now
they're overrating themselves. But let me say my second one first. Second, William Ruto has never run for a presidential election in this country, ever. And there's nobody in this country who has won a presidential election on their first time trying. So who is the underdog in this case?
Perhaps they're saying he's an underdog because, precisely because, you know, you're saying he has 10,000 hours. Maybe the Daily Nation is saying that he's going to get 10,000 more. And be a continual contender.
But you say I wasn't nice to the Kikuyus.
Yeah, I think so. I thought that was.
But it is true. They don't. Kikuyu, you're overrating yourselves. You do not matter. Look, Gema plus Kalenjin constitute about 7.9 million registered voters. Right, 5.6 Gema, 2.3 Kalenjin. You have on Raila's side, you have from the last election, you have the Luos, you have the Kambas, you have the Luyas. They constitute about 6.9. That's a margin of 1 million votes. Yeah. All right. Now the guy with his constituency intact at the moment is Raila Odinga. All he needs is not even 1 million. He just needs about 800,000 Wakorinos to become president. And that's if at all we are going to have a presidential election, which I doubt.
In the first place.
Which I doubt. What is coming, in my view, is an executive premiership. We're going to have a parliamentary system. So this underdog thing, it shows
I mean, of course, I think if you just look at it, it's a lazy headline, right? I think the newspapers, if we look at them very plainly and very honestly, I don't think they know how to interpret the dissolution of parliament story. So what they've decided to do is put it aside and write some nonsense.
Actually, what I think, guys, is that the Daily Nation was actually making an attempt at being complimentary to Raila Odinga because as human beings, we generally know that underdogs, when somebody is called an underdog, it means that they're going to carry the day. That was my personal interpretation of the headline. And speaking of the headline, we do have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze it for you. We ask, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And finally, is this headline effective or is it just plain lazy? I tend to agree with 2J though, that it is lazy. So I'm going to toss it immediately. On to the Standard. Standard is telling us that Ruto was in a frenzy, and the specific day of the frenzy was the 26th of September. That was last Friday. So the headline is making reference to 11 tweets that he sent out, which were, from my interpretation, were a lamentation. He was lamenting about.
But DM, did you see the tweets?
I actually did on 2M's account because the William Ruto has blocked me on Twitter. So I saw them on 2M's account. When I read this headline, I said, let me verify and look at the tweets. And indeed, he was talking about the deep state and godfathers and making that lamentation about those things or those people coming into in the way of the Hustler nation, which he was saying will triumph. But then interestingly, and also covered by the Standard, is that after these tweets, political leaders who are aligned to the deputy president and are on Twitter began this campaign about the dissolution of parliament and the support for it, saying, you know what, dissolve parliament. This is a this is a dare.
It's a dare.
Do you know what a dare is?
Yes.
And if a dare is coming from a politician, it's a bluff.
Yes.
Because these are politicians. There is no politician in the world who enjoys candidacy more than incumbency. These are people who are in office saying, take away my position from me, that position that they had planned to be in until 2022. So this is interesting. I think there are some undercurrents of either promises that they have been given, promises in the material sense, because these are human beings protecting their jobs or not protecting their jobs, and saying, you know what, take this job away from me.
And I think with that interpretation of it being a dare rather than an actual commitment to wanting Parliament to be dissolved, the headline then makes sense. He is in a frenzy, you know, he doesn't know what to do, he's confused, and so, you know, one day they're saying dissolve, the next day they're saying don't dissolve, and now they're back to dissolution.
You know what, guys, just keep me updated on what he tweets, because I can't see it, which is I'm quite surprised. Somebody who's running for president cannot take a little maybe criticism or dissent, and deleted me. Now if he'll be president, he'll literally delete your life. Delete my life.
And that's exactly what I was thinking. If he can block you and he is not president now, what will he do to the rest when they criticize him?
Because I suppose his jurisdiction right now is in Twitter.
Yes.
The most he can do is
I mean, now if he gets the monopoly of force, he will lock up people. But I also want to say this. I think I don't think he has grace. You know, someone like you can abuse someone nicely, and then they'll say, you know, they will not even react. But he looks like if you criticize him a bit, he will come full force. And I also want to say this a little bit carefully. I think
quite chatty today.
If anyone who has criticized him or made his life a little bit harder as deputy president will get some revenge, if at all Ruto becomes president.
All right, that's on to the Star.
This guy called Daniel Ndei said that he will leave Kenya if Ruto becomes president. On to the Star.
Why Ruto is walking a tightrope over pledges. So in this piece, the Star outlines some of the promises that the deputy president has made between 2013 and 2017, both of them focusing on the youth as a platform, or rather his so-called platform. In 2013, he said the Jubilee Party would set up an institute of technology in every ward in the country. I guess that did not happen. In 2017, again, he said that they would make way to find some jobs. And I think what's important here is to separate the pledges that the deputy president seemed to make as an individual and those of Jubilee, because I think if you actually go look at the Jubilee Party manifesto, the things that they said they would do, they have achieved many of those things. However, the article outlines that the deputy president might find himself in a bit of a conundrum when Kenyans start to ask where all those things that he promised to do are. And then they say, moreover, which I really agree with, is that he is the second in command in this country. And so instead of, you know, pursuing his own mission, his own agenda, he should use the office that he has to do the things that he said he would do. But instead, as DM has said, he's using his office in Twitter, or what is it? He's, you know, his position is in Twitter to make noise and to lament and complain.
But he's a smart politician. He's going to have answers for those questions that the Star is raising.
But as Kenyans, should we
point out where those
what does this guy stand for?
Promises are.
What does the deputy president actually stand for?
Wheelbarrow politics.
Yeah, exactly. And
what
handouts.
Politics?
Wheelbarrow.
Wheelbarrow politics.
Anyway.
So, Who gives us our winning headlines?
The Frenzy.
The Frenzy. I think that was quite catchy and true. So the Standard gives us our winning headlines. And onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze them for you. We ask, is it humorous or is it dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And finally, is the cartoon effective or is it just plain lazy? What do we have in the Daily Nation?
You have a rubbish cartoon today, and here you have a drawing of a teacher trying to put on a PPE kit, and all he's thinking is how he will look in a PPE kit in front of the classroom, and there on the teacher's table is some sanitizer. I don't like this cartoon.
This cartoon is literal. It is pointless, it's unimaginative, and it is so bland.
It's so bad that it's actually funny. If you like just actually think about it, it's not even saying anything. Oh my goodness. Okay,
so throw it far away.
Instantly.
In the Standard, we have Trump at a podium with another caricature at a podium as well, looking at Trump's shadow. And Trump's shadow for his head, takes the shape of the COVID-19 cell. So that maybe the cartoon is implying that Trump is his own kind of virus that is plaguing the US. Or that it's implying that his governance is the reason that the US is plunged so deeply and so tragically into
so
this pandemic.
The US is 4% of the global population. But the country itself accounts for 25% of the global cases of coronavirus.
Shocking.
There are over 1,000 Americans dying every single day. It's like it's unbelievable. I think you have to be quite.
And guess what, guys? Trump is still going to be president again.
Agreed.
He will.
I think the very strong cases that the liberals are making against Trump are only serving to fuel Trump's strongholds and bases. So this guy may actually get the popular vote this time as well as the college vote.
Yes.
But we toss.
I think we toss it. The cartoons today are quite uninspiring.
Yes.
What do we have in the Star?
In the Star, you have a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, and William Ruto behind a curtain. And Ruto and Raila have punching gloves. And in front of the curtain at the front is a seat, and it's called Msambweni. And the caption there is ready for round 2. But wait, the curtain is actually labeled Hustler Dynasty, BBI, Huduma number. And I think this is regard to the by-election happening in Msambweni, where Jubilee said they will not field a candidate. And Ruto seems to be behind an independent candidate. He's actually taking on the system again. And my hypothesis is, my hunch is he will be crushed in Msambweni.
But even beyond, whatever's going to happen there, isn't it so classless? It's so lacking of loyalty that you would go against what your party is doing just to prove a point.
On the following day. I
feel like we need to really look closely at this man and really understand what he stands for,
leave
what value.
DP alone. How can you have class when you're wandering in the wilderness?
Whoa!
I wasn't sure where you were going with that.
Which cartoon takes the day?
I actually want to appoint a losing cartoon, if I may.
Please say the Daily Nation.
The Daily Nation.
Is literally one of the worst we have seen.
Losing cartoon, so pointless. You gotta get it together.
The Daily Nation gives us our losing cartoon. So before we get on to our final thought, I'd like to remind our viewers to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what's our final thought, Tuem?
Now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled Tribal Business School, Lessons in Business Survival and Success from the Ultimate Survivors by Joe Owen.
So this week we will be looking at some leadership skills, some leadership stories, and trying to just understand what it takes to be a good leader. We'll draw examples from tribes, from the Bible, and from various, other institutions in the world. And so in this book, the author talks about how some of the remaining traditional societies, those are like the full-on nomadic groupings, around the world, survive under some of the most harshest environments. So he talks about in the Arctic, for example, the Sami tribe herd reindeer in temperatures that are close to -40 degrees. On the other spectrum, people in Laikipia who are herding their animals as well, walk 5 kilometers to get water under conditions that are as high as 40 degrees. So he shows that kind of spectrum of harsh environments. And he says that despite all of this and these lack of resources that these people, endure, many of these traditional societies have existed for hundreds of years. And then he contrasts that with businesses, and he says very few businesses manage to last even 25 years. And he says that less than 20 of the original 100 companies of the FTSE 100 have survived 25 years. So the FTSE 100 is the Financial Times Stock Exchange, and it is the companies that have the highest value on the London Stock Exchange. So he's saying not even 20 of them have managed to reach 100 years. And so he asks, if these traditional societies can live and survive longer in harsh conditions with few resources that modern companies have at their disposal, possibly these traditional societies are doing something right.
Makes sense.
And so for 7 years, the author and his research team looked at these traditional societies to discover how they survive. And the aim was to discover what things in common they shared, the successes and these secrets of survival, and whether those lessons could be applied to the business world. And so the first chapter in the book looks at strategy and competition. And here he outlines 3 strategic themes that his team came across as they spoke to these various tribal groups. And so they go as follows: adapt to your territory, or adapt to your market. Deal with the competition. So you either kill or you cooperate. And third, you use your resources well. So the one I'll focus on is deal with the competition. And so he says in the book that the alternative to competition is cooperation. And I believe in game theory we say the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
So cooperating with your competition is far easier than trying to get success through competition, through aggression. But the problem is that sometimes in competition you might lose. So on how to deal with cooperation, he gives this story about camels, Christmas, and cooperation. So he talks about a story he was given in a village where a young boy came across a lost camel. And it seemed like it had come across from one village into the next. So for the kid, he got so happy. He said Christmas has come early because camels are worth a lot. So the elders gathered together to decide what to do with the camel. And they could tell from the markings on the camel that it did indeed come from another village.
Tribe,
But with no hesitation, they called the boy back in and they told him, take this camel back to the village from where it came. And the reason was simple. They could have claimed the camel and they could have had, a short amount of time with, value, with money. But they would have bitter neighbors. They'd have a neighbor with a grudge. And you never know when the support of your neighbor will be needed. So for them, they say that managers like these tribes should learn to pick their battles. And he later then goes on to give 3 conditions that Sun Tzu gives for any battle to be worthwhile. He says you only pick a fight when there is a prize worth fighting for. You only pick a fight when you know that you will win. And you only pick a fight when there is no other way of gaining that prize through another route. So I think quite interesting to use tribes to tell us how to do business. A bit condescending, slightly racist, but I'll take it.
Well, are we just too sensitive about nobody should talk about tribes and traditional cultures?
Look at the cover of the book. I mean, it's head to head with a white man in his suit and an African in his traditional clothing. It's so
No, I do agree that much as the book makes a lot of sense, there are some examples that are quite patronizing.
Yes, but there's some lessons, some lessons.
A lot of lessons, yes.
And by the way, Tuje, the way you finished your part, I hope Karen was watching.
About
Karen who? Who's this lady Karen?
He's dog whistling, huh?
I love the chapter 2, chapter on change. And he says, change or die. Now, he says, if you don't adapt, you will simply die. And businesses are normally familiar with the challenges of constant changes. So you have new competition, you have new technology, you have pandemics, you have COVID, all right? You basically have conditions that make you have to adapt, all right? And for you to keep on moving, you need to keep innovating, all right? Now, he gives a story of a man from Papua New Guinea, and his name is Shilingi Koin. And this man loved to hunt wild animals. And but for 4 years of drought, taught him a lesson. 4 years. Now everything around him was dying, including the wild animals he was hunting. Now the only chance for survival he had was preserving these animals. And the reason that was the case is because tourists would come to Papua New Guinea, that region where he used to stay, and see animals and pay a little bit of money to see them. And sure enough, they came, and he was able to survive and survive the drought. Now, this is what he says. He says, if the environment does not change, then there's little pressure for tribes or business to change. Very true. But if the environment is changing, the question should be, how fast is it changing? All right? And I want to give an example, local example here. When COVID was announced by President Uhuru Kenyatta on March 15th this year, schools closed. Every primary school closed. Well, a guy called Joseph Maina from a place called Kirinyaga, this guy turned his classrooms into chicken pens. He actually kept chicken in classrooms, and because the guy had to survive, the guy had to
pivot.
He had to pivot. He had to find something that will give him his daily bread. Because his students were not there, chicken would give him his daily bread. That is someone who shifted with the pandemic.
So unless a man or woman would just sit down and lament, send out 11
on
tweets
Twitter.
saying,
Absolutely. And I also don't want to so much blame the people. We also have a condition in this country called the media, because if you are going to show stories of hope, of Joseph Maynard changing his classrooms to chicken pens, imagine what you'd be able to do in other places. The story of hope. But if you keep telling people that corruption is happening, murder is happening and all that, you will just have a country full of acidic pessimists who stay in their same economic situation for years. And that's because there's no story of hope. This in itself is hope.
Absolutely. There's a section of the book I found particularly interesting called Skills versus Knowledge, from know what to know how. And in this section, he talks about explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. And he begins by giving a explanation and differentiation between the two. So he says, explicit knowledge can be written down and taught and passed down through knowledge bases such as books. And they're called know what skills. But on the other hand, tacit knowledge is more difficult when it comes to codification. It is knowledge that is usually passed down, for instance, from generation to generation. And it is also most acquired through experience and practice and living it. And it's called know-how skills. So explicit knowledge would be things like, in business, since we're talking about business this week, something like finance and accounting. Those are things that are codified. Those are principles and practices that are universal. So they can be passed on, they can be put in books. And then tacit knowledge, I don't know what I would, which areas.
I don't know, maybe like a saving culture.
A saving culture or negotiation. And some skills like gardening, some things that need both passion and skill and experience. But I think actually what this section reminded me of, now that I think about it, is this book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, when he was talking about the fireman who saved a lot of people because he just sensed that a certain section of the building is going to collapse. And there, after the post facto, after the event, he couldn't explain
how he knew.
What informed his decision to move the group of firemen and the people that were being rescued to another section. He couldn't explain it. So this is just something that comes with a lot of years of subconscious awareness that is developed around factors and conditions that you sense rather than read. So in this book, as you're saying, Tuje, he does give a condescending commentary, because he says that in traditional societies, it is actually tacit knowledge that is more common because one of low literary levels, so there isn't a lot of information, history, experience, or skills that are codified in books and other knowledge bases. So it's very oral tradition based. However, there's it's very deliberate and intentional how this knowledge and information and experiences are passed down. And across the different tribes that he studied, including the Maasai, the progression of this know-how is passed on through age sets. So you see a progression based on what's it called? Age or cohorts of age sets. He even quotes somebody, Mbaramba farmer, which I think is who's from the PNG, the Papua New Guinea. He says, for 20 years you learn, for 20 years you do, and finally you teach the next generation for 20 years. So it's in progressions of 20 years. And then he says something which really I agree with. He says that businesses and corporations tend to value the know what, the explicit knowledge, that knowledge which can be codified and that is passed down and that is in books and can be trained and that is taught in colleges, and that is true. You apply for any job and they ask you what your qualifications are, particularly in terms of training. However, he says that the most successful corporations usually rely on tacit knowledge, on this knowledge that is from experience and just having the know-how instead of the know-what. And he says that if you talk to a lot of CEOs, they will tell you that they would hire a lot of people based on explicit knowledge. However, they will fire a lot of people for lack of tacit knowledge. So fewer academic, not to say that fewer academic credentials are not good, but fewer academic credentials may not work for ambitious people who want to climb up the ladder. So
that should go for Murkomen. He has 2 master's degree.
Can you stay within the book? Can you not lead us down a path?
Without culture is nothing.
Oh, wow. I will end by quoting Darwin, actually, who says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change," which is what Tuem alluded to earlier on. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You can also find us on your TV screens. We are on Pang Free to Air, Star Times, and Go TV. Have a good night and see you tomorrow.